Let's get started. We've given people now 4 minutes to join, so I think it's fair to assume that we can get started. All right. Ooh. All right. So, who am I and why you should listen to me today? First of all, I apologize for having a low voice. I'm just like traveling at the moment, so I'm outside of my usual environment. If there's any issue with the audio, please let me know. So my name is Mo Shafi. I was with McKinsey and Company for about 5 years, from business analyst all the way to an engagement manager, and have my MBA from Stanford and degree in public policy from the Harvard Kennedy School. And I've coached hundreds, if not thousands, of candidates over the years on case interview, on reviewing, their resume, on preparing their PEI, and so on. And that's honestly what I love doing in my free time. I get a lot of joy from getting people to the finish line in consulting, and nothing excites me more than helping you today. So, one quick rule of thumb, if you have any questions throughout this presentation, please leave them in the chat section. I will get to them, at different points in the presentation, and I'll try to answer them as much as possible. The second kind ask is that when you leave this room, Leland is going to ask you to review the session. I would really appreciate it if you give it a thumbs up, 5 stars, if you've enjoyed this session or learned anything from it. It makes a huge difference, and it's one click on your end. And I think a lot of people assume others will do that. So like sometimes I end up with a session of 40 people and 3 reviews. So I'm either doing something wrong in the presentations and they're not as well helpful, or people are, not clicking the button. So please help me determine which, if I need to revamp the content, or if I need to encourage people more to don't have to leave a review, just like leave the 5 stars, and I'd appreciate it. All right, so why this course? There is a spectrum of quantitative skills. You can be an absolute math genius, or you can be an absolute poet, and you don't have any experience with numbers, and they scare you. The goal of case interviewing is not to move you to that genius level. That's actually not where you want to be, and sometimes can be a disadvantage. The goal is to be kind of in the sweet spot in the middle. So we're trying to move you from freaking out about numbers all the way to kind of, okay, I can deal with numbers. I know what to do. Okay. So a knowledge of mathematics is essential for case interviews. Again, they're not testing your knowledge of mathematics. They're just testing your ability to use mathematics as a tool when working with business problems. All right. The first and most important thing that I want you to get out of this presentation is these very, very simple tables. There are 3 tables that you should absolutely memorize, know, and be ready to say the results instantly. And when I work with my clients, everyone knows what 4 times 8 is. I tell you 4 times 8, you say 32. The goal that we want to reach is that you instantly recognize these quantities, and like the basic multiplication table from 2nd grade, 3rd grade, whenever you start memorizing that, basic fractions and percentages and zeros. I tell my clients to take a photo of the next 3 pages. So take a screenshot of those and print them, put them next to your bed, put them in front of your computer, see them every day, memorize them. We want instant recognition. You see 8 and 4, you instantly see the number 32. You see 1 over 8, you instantly see 12.5%. It makes a huge difference just pushing it from like the to immediately saying, 1 over 12 is 1 over 8 is 12.5. Because when you're doing the simplifications and you're doing the math in the case, having that instant recognition is what's going to help you. You'll start seeing the numbers, you can break them down very quickly and see what's under the numbers. So this is absolutely in your control. It's not complicated. You just need to spend the hours to memorize them. So the first page I want you to take a screenshot of today is the multiplication table. Here are the common numbers that I see my clients usually mess up. 6 times 7, 7 times 8, 8 times 9, 11 times 12, and the multiples of 9. These are common mistakes where I see candidates kind of have issues with them. The second page I want to show you today, and I want you to take a screenshot of, is these tables. So the ability to convert fractions into percentages and vice versa. So I tell you 20%, you immediately know that it's 1 over 5. Don't confuse it with 25%, which is 1 over 4. Don't confuse it with 1 over 40, which is 2.5. So memorize these. Minimum, you want to land this job. It's a very simple table. You just memorize it both ways. Ask your friends, significant other, whatever it is, to grill you every day. Give you answers randomly. The moment you say or hesitate, that's a fail. You want instant recognition. That's what we are going to aim for. The next table that I want you to take a screenshot of is the zeros table. So I want you to know the zeros from 10 all the way to trillion. How many zeros are there, and what is the numerical representation of that number? So 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000, 10 million, all the way to 1 trillion. So instantly know how many zeros are there, and instantly know how it looks like. How long is it? Okay. I know it sounds very simple, but like all these case books and whatever people use these days, they go into the fancy stuff and teach you all this useless knowledge, and they don't focus on the basics. So these 3 tables are your absolute essential. If you don't get anything out of this presentation other than memorizing these 3 tables, then it's a win for me, because that is the kind of indicators you want to send to your interviewer, that I can do math very quickly, and it's all basic math. We'll talk a little bit about the more complicated stuff now, but if the basics are not there, if it's not instant recognition, it is immediately a red flag for me, because it's 100% in your control. All right, so knowing your zeros, the number one most common issue in cases that I've seen is working with zeros. So I tell someone to tell me the market size of papers in Boston, and then they would do something and they would say 200 billion. And when I hear that, it's almost like an immediate disqualification, because that person did not think about whether their answer makes sense or not, right? So what I want you to have is a sense of what each number means, right? So what does 10 mean? 10 is the number of employees in a small boutique consulting firm or in a restaurant. 100 is the seating capacity of a restaurant in the city. It can seat probably 100 guests. 1,000 is the number of people that visit a busy urban retail store. 10,000 downloads per app per day, 100,000. Starting capital for a small business like a nail salon or something of that sort. 1 million annual budget of a small nonprofit organization. 10 million is the total yearly revenue of a successful regional restaurant chain. 100 million is the value of a mid-size corporate acquisition deal. 1 billion is the market cap of a small but well-established public company. 10 billion is GDP of a small country. 100 billion is the annual revenue of PepsiCo, and 1 trillion is the approximate GDP of a large country like Spain or Australia. So this is very important to know what does each order of magnitude kind of correspond to, so that when you hear a billion, you think like, okay, that's the size of a company that went through IPO. When you hear 100 billion, it's either like a really large company like PepsiCo that is global and has sales all over the world, or I'm doing a math mistake. So if your case is asking you, a common case that I do with my clients is one about carpet manufacturer in the Northeast. And then there is one example that makes you make a math mistake and then give an answer of like $100 million. You should immediately think that $100 million in profit for a small manufacturer of carpet does not make sense, because $100 million is the total worth of a corporate acquisition. So it cannot be the profit of a single company in a given year. So, the math is one thing, and just making sense of the math, just like go online, look up stuff, try to have a sense of what each of these numbers mean in real life. That would help you catch mistakes when you're working with zeros and you've made an error there. Another thing that you need to memorize, a lot of things that you need to memorize here, so bear with me, is multiplying zeros. So like 10 times 10 is 100. 100 times 100 is 10,000, and so on. The various combination of those numbers. This will make your life a lot easier if you do that, because then you're less likely to make mistakes. So you say 1,000 times 10,000, 10 million easily. So it's instant recognition for you. You don't have to count the zeros. And if you don't have to count the zeros, then you're less likely to make a mistake. Versus if I tell you 10,000 times 10,000, it's going to be very hard for you to figure out that it's 100 million if you don't instantly recognize that, because you're going to count zeros, and when you count zeros, it slows you down, and then you become prone for error. So please memorize these, and to that point of instant recognition, as we said. All right, the next technique I want to talk about, now we're done with the memorization, hopefully, moving to approximation. When to approximate, like almost everywhere. It's a market sizing problem, it's a pricing problem, and so on and so forth. No one in case interviews expect you to, work with numbers as they are. And the numbers are created in a way to test whether you're going to approximate or you're going to make your life difficult. So instead of working with, say, 4.7 and trying to divide that by, 2, which might be complicated, just say, I will round it up to 5 million. Is that okay? And your interviewer would say yes, or you don't even have to wait for their approval. You can say, if that's okay with you, I'm going to round 4.7 and to 5, and wait for them to kind of correct you or tell you no if that's not a good approximation. So try to round numbers to things that you can easily work with, right? So like number 4 or number 16 or number 20. These are amazing numbers. Why? Because they can be divided easily. They can be multiplied easily. you can work with them in all sorts of ways. If you have 19 versus if you have 20, that's a huge difference. If they tell you like find, you know, 20% of 20, right? It's going to be very difficult if it's 19, but when you round it up to 20, it's a lot easier to work with. So whenever you're writing a number or like saying a number or starting a calculation in the case interview, just think, can this be um, facilitated? Can this be approximated? And then if yes, and the answer is almost always yes, unless it's an easy whole number that you can work with, um, try your best to do that. Here's a case example. Like they can tell you, like a retail chain has 67 stores, each averaging 42,851 square feet, and a revenue of $327 per square feet. What's the annual revenue? So if you were to multiply these numbers, it's going to be an absolute nightmare, right? So what you can do is instead of 67, you approximate it to 70. Instead of 42,851, you can just say 40,000. And then 3327, you can just say 300 or 330, and then multiply. One short trick here is that look which direction you went in your approximation. So 67, we increased it. 42, we decreased it. And 327, we increased it. So the final answer is going to be like, very close to the actual answer, but we rounded up two numbers and rounded down one number, but we rounded that number down quite substantially, right? So like 2,851 versus here we just added 3, here we just added 3. So chances are the final number is going to be lower, right? So just keep a mental note in your head that like, is the number going to be lower or higher now that we've approximated? So you decreased this from 42,851 to 40,000. So your final answer is going to be underestimated. So then you can just like do a quick math and say like, all right, instead of 900, since we approximated, I'm going to add like 10% or 20%. And then I'll assume it's in that 900 to 920 range. And the real answer is 927. So, we're right. We approximated well, and we did a great job. Even if you don't say the last part of like trying to figure out, where you rounded down versus rounded up, you got a pretty good answer of 900 million. That would fly in the interview. You don't have to kind of self-adjust for that. All right, so I'll stop here and see if there are any questions. Can you round up or down during interviews? Is it better to ask for permission first? You can round up or down. And is it better to ask for permission? I would say no. Just like don't wait for them awkwardly. Don't say like, "Can I round it up?" Like just say, "If you don't mind," like, or if there's no issue, I will round this to 40,000. And like I guarantee 99% of the cases, they're not going to say anything, unless you make like an outrageous approximation. Say like the 67 stores that we have here. If you said I will round that to 100, that is not an approximation. That's just like changing the number. So they will tell you no, because the number is going to be very different. But small things like this, where you're within a certain percentage of the actual number, it's not a big deal. All right, moving now to averages. So you all know what is the mean and the median and the mode. If not, then we'll cover it very quickly. The mean is taking a bunch of numbers, adding them up, and then dividing by the total number. So let's say, a retail has 5 stores with these numbers. What is the average revenue? You're just going to sum up 2.1, 1.8, 2.4, 3.2, 1.5, and divide by the total number, which is 5, and that will give you the arithmetic average. The weighted average is you weigh the points or samples that are bigger more. So, for example, a company has profit margin in three regions: North America, 12%; Europe, 8%; Asia is 15%. If we find the average, just like adding those three numbers up and dividing, we're not going to get a very accurate number because 60% of their revenue is in North America. So the final number is going to be closer to the 12 than any of those other two. So what we do is we multiply 60% times 12, 30% times 8, and 10% times 15, and we get the weighted average. Median is basically you put the values in order, and then you take the middle one. Very simple. And then mode is the most frequently mentioned number in the set. So those are, table stakes, basic math. You should know them. Don't forget them or confuse them. A couple of things to keep an eye on. So don't confuse mean and median. It's very common for people to confuse mean and median. Mean is influenced by outliers because, if there's a crazy number out there, it's going to shift the mean, but the median does not get affected by outliers. This is an important, piece of knowledge that you should know. And that's it for averages. Moving to using friendly numbers. Whenever you have to come up with an assumption yourself, make it work for you, right? So like if the person told you like you're trying to do a case and you have to estimate the mileage per gallon of a car, right? You can say like 17, or you can say 20, or you can say 24, right? 24 is a great number. It can be divided by 3, can be divided by 4, can be divided by 2, it can be divided by 6. So why use a weird number if you can use a number that works for you? So whenever you're getting the chance to make an assumption, ensure that that assumption makes sense from a number point of view, and that you're working with a friendly number. So let's say you had to assume how many people are there in the US. Instead of saying 327 million, you should say 330 million because you don't know what's going to come up in the case. So choosing a number that is friendly to you is absolutely needed. Amazing. And then friendly for percentages and fractions: 66%, 16.7%, 12%. Those because they have fractions that are easy to work with, like 1/6 or 1/8. So keep that in mind. All right, let's go through histograms very quickly. So you'll be expected to kind of know how to read histograms. A histogram is a distribution curve. So basically, it's trying to show you how many data points land in this bucket, and this bucket, and this bucket, and this bucket, and so on. So let's say you're serving a retail chain, and they have many stores in the country. One way to show their distribution is to create these bins. So how many stores are in the $0.5 to $1 million in revenue? 3. How many are 1 to 1.5? 6. How many 1.5 to 2? And so on and so forth. So you just see the distribution of the sample that you're working with. You see what are the bins, and then what is the frequency of each one of these bins. So how many points in the data sample fits into this bin? How many stores have revenue between 0.5 and 1? How many stores have 1 to 1.5? And so on. Okay. Other graphs that you should be able to read: a simple line chart. It shows something over time, revenue over time, profit over time, whatever it is. Bar charts very similar to line charts, except it's bars instead of lines. So very straightforward. Pie and donut charts, they're less likely to happen, to show up in cases, but in case they show up, you know how to use them. Basically, it shows you the parts of a whole. So how much of your sales came from product A, product B, product C, and so on and so forth. Um, so that's the pie chart. The scatter plot is basically showing next axes and a y-axis. So trying to show growth versus revenue or price versus quantity. So there's a number on the x-axis, there's a number on the y-axis, and then you're seeing kind of the point that represents the combination of the two. All right. Any questions so far? Wait, where are we? All right. Now moving on to some analyses that you're expected to know the formula for. So break-even analysis is basically the break-even period equals the incremental profit divided by the cost. So, just not to confuse you with all the symbols that are over there, let's look at an example. So a client's new product has a fixed cost of $500,000 and a variable cost of $15 per unit. Each unit sells for $65. How many units must they sell to break even? So the way you do it is you look at what is the profit margin of one unit. So each unit you sell it for 65 minus 15, that gives you 50. Then you divide 500,000, the fixed cost, divided by the margin of one product. So 500,000 divided by 50 gives you 10,000. So you need to sell 10,000 units in order to break even. Another formula is the market size, market share. So like how much is the sale of a single company? You take the market size and you multiply it by their market share. Say they're in a $100 million business, not business market, and they have 10% of the market, then they have $10 million in sales. Very straightforward. Weighted average, we just covered. We just multiply the weight times the number plus the weight times the number plus the weight times the number. So it's very straightforward. Finally, the ROI is basically the gain minus the cost divided by the cost. So how much you gained. Let's say you bought a house for $1 million, you sold it for $2 million. So the gain is 2 million minus the cost, 1 million divided by the cost. So 2 minus 1 divided by 1 equals 100%. All right. Tables. You will, I almost guarantee that you'll face a table in your case interviews. And typically what they do is that they show you a table or a graph, and then they ask you, like, what do you see? What are your observations? My recommendation is the following. Look at the columns of the table to understand what values are there, and then look at the rows, like the first column, basically, the rows of the first column. And that would give you an idea about what the table is saying. So that, like, as you're, you can't take a moment to think about your answer and then come back with an answer. You have to read it live. So the way you do it, and you say, like, okay, so I see that this table shows product line and revenue for 21, revenue for 22, growth and profit margin of, it looks like different kinds of products, like electronics, furniture, da 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 da. And then, so now you kind of put yourself in a good position because you've already established what the table is. Then look at trends and outliers, and min and max. Trends, outliers, mins, and max. So looking at the 21 to 22, I noticed that electronics has increased. Similarly, furniture has increased. Home decor has increased. The only one that decreased is appliances. So that's my first observation, you see? So like looking at before and after, looking for a trend over time is a very good way to come up with insights on the fly. Then you go and look at growth. All right, overall growth is positive, mostly driven by furniture. It's growing at 25%. But again, we have one product category that is a drag on the business. And similarly, market segment comparison, you just look at the same stuff. You read the first row, then you read the first column, then you look at min, max, any outliers, and any trends. So look at, how is it distributed? Enterprise is the largest, client share, 22%. So looking at what is super high, what is super low, is there any interesting trend? What is super high? What is super low? Is there an interesting trend? So, for example, we notice here that this is 22%. This is the highest in client share, and the lowest in revenue, lower in growth. So there is a negative correlation. It seems that the more client share we have, the slower the growth is. That could be an insight that you share in the case interview. Okay. In the interview, you want to talk as much as possible, especially in the math section. So you don't want to do math in the darkness and come back with an answer or a number. As a matter of fact, most of the times the interviewer does not have a number in mind. Sometimes they have it printed, or if they've done the case so many times, but that's not what they're looking for. They want to see how you got to that number. So if you're silent and then you're doing math on your paper and then you come back with a number, that is absolutely useless for the interviewer. But what you want to do is talk about every step that you're doing. So I'm going to take the 22% divided by 3, and then I will get the final answer for profit. And then I'll take the profit and I'll multiply it by whatever. So you want to talk it out loud. Even if you're doing simple multiplication, 37 times 12, you say okay, so I'll multiply the 2 by the 7, and then da-da-da-da. The reason for that also is that if you make a mistake, they can catch you early and tell you, no, that's not right. But if you just hide and write your answers and come back and say the answer is 32, there's no way to know where you went wrong. So it's going to delay the case more, and it's not going to be a positive experience for either of you. Okay, we have another question. What are some signs for when you should move from giving general insights on a chart or a table to actually start doing some calculations? Generally, the interviewer should tell you that. If it's an interviewer led case, like it is the case at McKinsey, for example, it is an interviewer led. So he or she will tell you, all right, so let's do some math now, and then they will move on to the math part. For interviewee led, you need to manage kind of the case time a little bit, and then think about what is the next step that you need to move on to. So usually you have a goal. So you want to give 2 or 3 insights about the table, but then move on and start doing the math that will help you achieve your goal, whatever the goal is. All right. We talked about profitability. We talked about ROI. Inventory turnover is basically how much your inventory turns over. Very easy explanation. Basically, let's say you're a Walmart. How much, how many times basically your inventory turns over per year? So, how many times um, you basically turnover is like how many times you've almost replaced the items in your inventory. Let's say, like, as a simple example, you have like an inventory of just like one sanitizer, right? So now you have one sanitizer in your inventory. You sold the first one in like 4 months. Then that's like one time when your inventory turned over. You sold an item and you have a new item coming over. So that's like the turnover. Then you sell it again, and then you replenish um, your inventory. Let's say you sell a very popular item, you're sold out, then you go call your factory, they ship you more equipment, um, then you fill up your inventory, start selling again. 3 months later, the inventory is empty. You go fill it up again. So every time of these is an inventory turnover. So it's a common metric to look at the turnover, how many times per year. So of course, in real life, you don't wait for your inventory to be fully empty. You're always replacing it. So the way to calculate inventory turnover is you look at how much you've sold divided by the average inventory at any given moment in time. So let's say you sold 6 million worth of good and you have 2 million worth of inventory in the inventory. So 6 divided by 2 equals 3. So you had turnover 3 times per year. The final one is the customer acquisition cost, which is the marketing cost divided by how many new customers you gained. Let's say you did a marketing campaign, $1 million. There are 1,000 people who came and signed up on your platform. The customer acquisition cost is marketing cost divided by number of new customers. So it's going to be 1 million divided by 1,000 equals 1,000. Okay. Now putting it all together, you want to use the SMART method. Like I think I invented the SMART method. I don't know if someone else came up with it before, but the SMART method is not the SMART of the goals and KPIs. You should have a structure. So you should have a formula in mind that you start with. Let's say your goal is to calculate profitability. Profit is nothing but revenue minus cost. Your goal is to calculate, customer acquisition cost. It's marketing cost divided by number of customers. So first, you give your interviewer a structure that you're going to follow. So, like, first, I'm going to calculate the revenue, then I'm going to calculate the cost, then I'm going to subtract the cost from the revenue. And then they give you the green light. That means that, like, your approach is right. You don't want to jump into the calculation immediately. If your approach is wrong, you'll waste time just like doing random stuff. Then you start doing the numbers. And when you're doing the numbers, like, you want to talk out loud as much as possible so that they can catch your errors. Now, if you're doing the math and you see that the numbers are not super friendly, make an approximation. So 1.5 becomes 2, 3.1 becomes 3, and so on and so forth. So as we discussed about approximation, like, declare that to your interviewer, make the approximation, do the math, and then review it. Whenever you get a final number, you want to sense check it in the review. So does that number make sense? So let's say you're doing a market share analysis and you got like a 95%. Does that make sense? Is there a market where there is one player that controls 95%? Very rare. So probably I did a math problem. Or say you're calculating revenue. The revenue came out to be 100 billion, as we said, and it's a case that says small company, then I must have made a mistake. It's probably like 1 million, not 100 billion. So always sense check your answer, even if the number makes sense, like say it out loud. So like say, okay, I got 18%. We know that they were at 20% last year, so 18% makes sense. So it's a way to show your interviewer that you're just not like a math machine, but you actually make sense of the numbers that you're coming up with. And that's an important skill. And then once you do the math, then translate it into the insight. Don't like just stop at the number, like, hey, here's the revenue or like whatever. Like think about what does that mean? What is the so what? So like, okay, we calculated that their ROI is 80%. So it's a great investment because, it resulted in 80% and that's above their threshold. Or let's say you're calculating profit and the profit came back positive or negative, then you can say like, okay, so like, I see that now we've solved the profit problem because like we're getting a healthy profit margin of like 20% or whatever it is. Just like don't stop at the number, try to kind of make sense of it internally to review it and externally to turn it into an insight and continue with the case. And with that, we are done, my friends. Any questions, comments on what we've shared today?
Thanks, Mo.
Jack, go ahead.
I appreciate the time and running through all this. It's definitely very helpful.
Wait a second. Say that again. Sorry, Jack. I couldn't hear you first time.
No, was just saying thank you for the time and for taking this through this. I think it's very helpful. So I have a first round interview with McKinsey later this week, and so have been kind of focusing on this case math as like one of the things to improve on. And one thing I've been finding as an issue, which maybe it's just because I've been doing more interviewee-led cases as practice, but kind of after getting the numbers together, and I've struggled a bit on how to put them together into a formula and kind of pulling the pieces together to figure out what the next step would be in forming a calculation. Do you think, what should I expect to not have to worry about this as much with the McKinsey-led cases? And, are there certain things that maybe I can try focusing on to just make that process a little bit easier, besides waiting for, them to tell me, okay, great, let's calculate this, and kind of take that on myself?
Yeah, exactly. You don't have to worry as much about it with McKinsey. Now, of course, you need to own the case.
Yeah.
You need to own the insight and all of that, not just like wait for them to feed you stuff. But it is less of an issue compared to interviewee-led cases, where you're expected to kind of carry the entire thing. The way McKinsey works is typically the case is broken down into questions, and then they have like certain questions that they want to walk you through in the 40 minutes that they have with you. So they will have like a structure that they're following. So they will tell you like, okay, first we're going to calculate the math. And you can always ask for insight, ask for a number. And if they don't want to share it with you, they'll tell you like, well, what do you think we should do? Now, of course, like you want to be as independent as possible, but if you feel lost or you need verification, just like, say what you're going to do. Let's say you're calculating profitability or break-even time of an investment. So you say like, okay, first I'm going to calculate the fixed cost, and then I'm going to divide it by this, the revenue per unit minus the cost per unit, and then I'll find the profitability. Does that make sense? And then they will tell you yes, and then you calculate it, and then you say like, okay, so it's 4 years. It's not that long of a timeline. Do we know anything about, the duration of this equipment, like how long it lasts or something of that sort? And then they will answer you, and then you can come up with an insight. It's like, it's not that hard. Like from the beginning, you can tell what kind of case is it. Like, is it a market entry case? Is it a profitability case?
Yeah.
And then you know what the end conclusion is going to be, right? It's going to be either enter the market or don't enter the market, make the investment, don't make the investment. And at the beginning, you came up with the kind of the framework. So it's not that difficult to predict what the next question is going to be. Like, oh, they focused on revenue, then they're going to ask them about cost. Oh, they asked about, I don't know, competition, then they're going to ask about whatever other factor. So you can kind of predict with time what's going to come at you. So yeah, the short answer is you shouldn't worry too much about it.
Okay.
It's a lot of interviewer led.
Awesome. Thank you.
Amazing. All right, team. I don't think there are any more questions. Please don't forget to rate this session. If you want to schedule a session with me, I help candidates from all sorts of backgrounds land their dream jobs at consulting firms, and I would be super excited to do that with you. Let me know how I can help in the future, and visit my page and schedule a 15-minute chat for free to learn more about your background, where you are in the journey, and how I can help you. Yes, looking/vibe matters a lot in consulting. Is that the question? Does looking vibe? Yeah. I don't know what that question is. Like the looks, yes, the looks matter a little bit. Just if you're professional, like well dressed, and so on. The vibe doesn't matter as much. It's pretty structured, and you do usually 2 cases with 2 different people, and like there's just very little room for them to like you or not to like you. It's like a very very structured exercise. It's a dance, so there's no place for them to kind of wiggle or let their personal vibe interfere with the decision. So I would say looks matter if you're professional, showing up on time, dressed well, but beyond that, it doesn't matter. It's your performance in the case. Thank you, team. Hope you had some fun today, and I hope to see many of you later. And please don't forget to leave a review. Takes a lot of time to prepare these presentations, and I hope you find them useful. So thank you for that. Take care.